All right, so it's been a minute or 10 or 20 minutes, maybe half hour or so since we've done, it's been a long time since we've done a video, but we are getting back to it at Fort Clatsop now, which is part of the Lewis and Clark National Historical Park. They've got a replica of the old fort here. So we're gonna go in, get the Junior Ranger stuff, see the video, check out the museum, see what it's all about. It's Lewis and Clark are the reason we have such amazing country on the West Coast. We got in. This is a fee park, $10 per person for adults 16 and over. Not sure about kids. Didn't look to see what was on there, but we have an America the Beautiful pass. So it's free for us. So now we are, okay, Kylie says anyone under 15 is free. So $10, 16 and up. America the Beautiful pass. If you go to more than 2 parks in a year, that's the way to go. 80 bucks for the year. So we're gonna go down first to the fort because they said they have a ranger talk starting in about 10 minutes on the birds and everything they saw on the expedition. So we're gonna check that out. Then we'll take you back in. We'll see the video and different exhibits. So they have a pretty elaborate trail system here. See the map here behind me you can hike through. One of the most popular ones I believe is the Fort to Sea Trail. It looks like it's, I don't know here, about 6.5 miles or so down the Sunset Beach on the Pacific. Park's divided into several things. This is the winter encampment of Lewis and Clark. You have Dismal Niche and a couple others just on the Washington side of the Columbia River. So we'll learn more about it as we go.
Okay, so this is a military expedition. When you winter over, there's 3 times they wintered over. Does anyone know the first time? 1803 to 1804, outside of St. Louis. Camp Dubois is the first time they wintered over. They go up the Missouri River, so let's go back up a little bit. Clark has a large barge built in Pittsburgh, takes it down, they link up with all the rest of the people outside St. Louis, and they swell the expedition to about 40 to 50 people, maybe 60. They hire a bunch of French engagés, help them to get that barge and the 2 pirogues up the river to their winter over spot of 1804 to 1805. Anyone know what that fort is named?
Mandan.
Fort Mandan, you got it. Named after the local people, the Mandan tribe. So, winter over there. While we're there, a man named Toussaint Charbonneau introduces himself and offers his service as an interpreter. Lewis hires him. Now, Toussaint Charbonneau has 2 wives. He's allowed to take one of them. Any idea who he chooses? You got it, Sacagawea. Now, you can pronounce that numerous ways. Clark writes phonetically Sacagawea. She's a Shoshone who's been kidnapped by the Hidatsa as a young girl. So she speaks Hidatsa and Shoshone. I believe their tribe would pronounce it Sacagawea. The Hidatsa would pronounce it Sacagawea, or vice versa. And when a man named Nicholas Biddle edited Clark's journals, he changed Sacagawea to Sacagawea. So that's why we have a variety of. You're not wrong as long as you know why you're saying it. So all of them are right. He introduces, so Toussaint Charbonneau, Sacagawea. Now she's pregnant and she's having a heck of a time delivering her baby. Hours and hours, no success. A man named Jessom is an interpreter among the party with Lewis, and he tells Lewis to take the rattle of a rattlesnake, grind it up, put it in water, and have Sacagawea drink it. With nothing to lose, Lewis does it. She drinks it. Within 10 minutes, Jean-Baptiste is born. Lewis does not understand how the efficacy of this could be working. Dr. Peck, who wrote a great book called For Perishing the Attempt and also So Hard to Die, said there's no medical or scientific reason why this should work, because that's nothing more than your fingernail ground up. So we don't know, but it worked. Apparently it worked before because Jessom recommended it. Don't have an answer to that one. Actually, you're going to find a lot of things about the expedition. Whenever someone makes a direct statement, be very skeptical. There's a lot of things we don't know for sure. They now have those 3 on a board. We have 2 other civilians, and we picked one up back by St. Charles. Probably, arguably, the 3rd most important man on the expedition. Any idea who he might be? George Drouillard. expert frontiersman. He joins them before they go up to Missouri. So now we have him. Who's the fifth civilian we have? Closely tied to Clark.
The slave.
York, exactly. That's our 5 civilians. We got 28 military. So we send the barge back, cut our numbers down to, we're going to be 33 people. Name the 5 civilians, we have 28 military. Name the 2 officers.
Lewis and Clark.
Lewis and Clark got that. How about 3 sergeants? Anyone know the sergeant? Gash, got Sergeant Gash, he's a carpenter. We only lost 1 man on the expedition. That happened before we got to Fort Mandan. Any idea who that is? It was Sergeant Floyd. He probably died of an appendicitis. All the indications are that he did. So, when he died, the men elected Sergeant Gash to replace him. So that kind of tells you what kind of man Sergeant Gash is. He's a very skilled carpenter. So we have Gash, 2 others, Pryor and Ordway. So Sergeant Pryor has 9 men, Sergeant Ordway has 7, and Sergeant Pryor's 9, Gash has 7, and Ordway has 7. So that's the 33 people. We're going to take our 2 pirogues. We sent the barge back. We're going to head to the mouth of the Columbia, and something gets in our way. Any idea what gets in our way?
Mountains.
The Rocky Mountains, exactly. So how do we get across the Rocky Mountains?
Walk.
Yes.
Climb it.
Well, you can, but it's going to be a long climb. You need some help. Any idea?
Horses.
Horses. And who has the horses?
Shoshone.
The Shoshone. So we have an in because Sacagawea speaks Shoshone. So we finally make contact with them after some effort trying. Meet the Shoshones, and who is the chief of the Shoshones?
Her brother.
Her brother Camelway. So that kind of gives us an in to get our horses. But in order to communicate, Lewis only speaks English. Now we picked up a man named Francois Labiche before we went up to Missouri. He speaks English and French. Charbonneau speaks French, and Hidatsa, Sacagawea speaks Hidatsa and Shoshone. So in order to talk to the chief of the Shoshone, Lewis talks to Labiche in English. Labiche talks to Charbonneau in French. Charbonneau talks to Sacagawea and Hidatsa, and she talks to her brother Camelway in Shoshone. He talks to her in Shoshone. She talks to Charbonneau in Hidatsa. Charbonneau talks to Labiche in French. Labiche talks to Lewis in English. So apparently they had enough communication despite what's probably going to be lost in translation to get their horses. We cross the mountains, and now do we take our horses to the ocean? No. No, we leave with the Nez Perce. So sometimes we get asked where they keep the horses. They're back with the Nez Perce. What do we do now? We cut down some ponderosa pine canoes, haul them out, and we take them down the Snake River. And now, November 1805, on the Columbia. No man-made features on the Columbia. It is a wild, wild river. Anyone know the nickname of the Columbia? It shares the opposite with Hatteras, and Cape Hatteras in the East Coast. We are known as the graveyard of the Pacific, while Hatteras is the graveyard of the Atlantic, for good reason. If you ever make it to the Maritime Museum, they got a great display of all the ships that have been lost here over the years. So, we're taking our hollowed out ponderosa pine canoes in an attempt to reach the mouth of the Columbia. Ain't going to happen. The waters are very, very rough. They have a series of niches. We're going to try and make a campsite in these niches. Pull in there, the tide floods us out. We're not getting anywhere fast. Pull into what turns out to be a Chinook village. We call it the Middle Village. Lewis renames it Station Camp. We're going to go on foot and see the mouth of the Columbia. We're not getting any further in our canoes. Go up to Cape Disappointment, see the mouth of the Columbia. While we're at Middle Village, the Clatsops, who are the tribe on the Oregon side, Chinooks are up on the Washington side. By the way, they're all related by language. This is called we're the Lower Columbia Chinook. They go all the way up from Multnomah. The various tribes, all more or less, for the lack of a better comparison, cousins, let's say, they're all part of the Chinook people. So the Chinooks are businessmen. They've been trading for thousands of years, and with whites for about 30 to 40 before the expedition comes down here. So seeing whites is no big deal, except this group comes down the river. Everyone else is taking their ships from the ocean in, and they've been trading. And Lewis notices one of the Chinook is wearing naval garb from Europe. So they've been trading for that kind of stuff. They're expert traders. The market price is set way up here because Chinook know the value of what they have. Clatsops come in and make contact with them and tell them the southern side here has game, much easier access to the ocean, much better place for a campsite. So we do the so-called vote. Everybody's asked their opinion. Now, Lewis and Clark are the leaders. They're always going to make a decision regardless of what the numbers are in the vote. However, the majority says let's go south. They do, but they can't cross where they are, can they? We got to go up about 20 miles, roughly across from where Napa is on Route 30. They cross over, work their way down Young's Bay, up past Tongue Point into Young's Bay, up around into this river that Lewis calls the Natal. And so that is the Natal River. It's around 5th of December, let's say. he looks up and sees the high ground. So what's the high ground going to do for us? Going to keep us from getting flooded out by the tide, right? So this looks like a good spot to make a fort. High ground, access to fresh water. There's a spring right back here. Good place to bring in your canoes. There's a canoe landing down there. So we're going to build a fort. What do we need to build a fort? You got wood, but before you even start cutting down wood, what do you need? You got labor. You got 33 people. Well, won't count the baby. You got 32 people. You got tools, but that's even before all that. What do you need? If I told you build me a fort, what are you going to ask me? So Clark draws on the elkskin cover of his journal. Okay, he draws this diagram on the elkskin cover of his journal. It's actually a facsimile of it in his own handwriting. And because it's on his elkskin cover of his journal, we figure it wasn't a rough draft. So here's what he has. Feel free to pass that around. We have our front entrance here. We have 3 huts, they call them, along the side. These are all listed over here. Don't tell us who's where. Got 16 foot, 18 foot, and 16 foot. My guess, Sergeant Pryor, 9 men, Sergeant Gasson, 7, Sergeant Ordway, 7. Maybe it's the other way around. They tell us very little about the fort. But if you want to know about a Clatsop village house, Clark will give you details down to the inch. Why do you think that is? Why would Clark tell you everything you want to know about a Clatsop village house, but not much about the fort? That's what Jefferson sent him out to do. Tell me about the flora, the fauna, and the people. I don't care about your fort. They obviously didn't care about the fort because they write very little about it. And unfortunately, they don't care about us 200 years later asking about the fort. So that's the enlisted quarters. Each one has a fire pit in the center, and they had a smoke hole in the roof. What happens when the wind blows in?
Fills it with smoke.
Fills with smoke. So the enlisted may complain about that, and they do some sort of improvised chimney. We don't know what it is. They don't tell us other than it's very smoky, and we made some sort of chimney. That's the enlisted quarters. Over here is a Charbonneau family room. Toussaint Charbonneau, Sacagawea, and Jean Baptiste, who was nicknamed Pomp by Clark, lived there. The only room with a fireplace and a chimney is the officer's room. Captain Lewis and Captain Clark are in there. The chimney can break away from the fort if needed. You catch it on fire. And that's who the next room takes care of. That's the sergeant, the guard, and 3 men. They're on duty 24/7. Lewis writes orders. The gates can be open during the day. People can visit. At night they have to leave and then close the gates. Sergeant guards guarding the little meat room next to them. That's where all our supplies are, and the captain's quarters. You can open the back gate. The guard can to let people have access to the water at night if necessary. That's the layout of the fort. I can tell you who's doing what. Clark kept good detail of who's doing what as they start construction. So, December 9th, we start felling trees. By Christmas Day, there's enough of a fort that we can move into it. Now, one thing that helped here, Clark found a Clatsop village near where the Dairy Queen and Astoria High School is today. It appeared to be abandoned. It wasn't. They just weren't there at that time of year. He sends Sergeant Pryor and some men, go over there and get wood from it, because the Clatsops have these beautiful cedar lodges. I assume that's what was there. Whatever it was, they went and brought wood back. Sergeant Gass, expert carpenter that he is, knows about, he talks about a tree. He can cut beautiful 10 foot by 2 foot by 1 inch planks out of it easily. One of the easiest woods he's ever worked with. What do you think that tree was? There's 3 main trees here at the time. Anyone know that they are? Hemlock's one of them.
Red cedar.
Cedar, tree of life. You got the red cedar, one more. The Sitka spruce. It only grows in a narrow band along the coast. That's probably what Gass is talking about, but we don't know that. So, probably hemlock made the majority of the walls. We don't know that. So we get the fort built for all practical purposes by New Year's. On March 23rd, 1806, we leave. And we're supposed to stay here till April, but what happens to elk is you keep shooting them, and you hit about 130 of them over the course of your time here. They can start getting smart, so they start getting further away. As far as what we call Saddle Mountain, what the Chinook call Wallowhoof, that is their sacred mountain. That's where the creation story starts. That's actually the source of the Natel. Thunderbird landed on it, her eggs were thrown down, that became the various tribes. So Saddle Mountain, you see it, that's a sacred place to the Chinook. The elk start going that far away. Good time to leave. They're here 106 days. It rains all but 12 of them. 2 days they have snow, and they saw the sun 6 days. So this is not typical Lewis and Clark weather. Another thing, they were loaded with fleas. I'm not able to give you the full Lewis and Clark experience today. No weather, no fleas. You will find some mosquitoes, as Clark called them. So they leave here. They leave the fort to the Clatsops. And the leader of the Clatsops' name is Cobaway, the Tyee of the Clatsops. So he uses it supposedly for a few years as a hunting lodge. Quite frankly, compared to what the Clatsops had, it wasn't much of a gift. But nevertheless, they used it for a few years. Now, in 1811, John Jacob Astor establishes the Pacific Fur Company at Fort Astoria. Ever since that time, this has been a tourist attraction. People would come from Fort Astoria to see where Lewis and Clark were. So we start getting oral history now. One of the men from the Pacific Fur Company comes here around 1811, 1812 or so, and notices that the roof is gone. Maybe the Clatsop took it back. And he knows another guy notices a bunch of logs are on the ground and some writing on it. One notices local people taking wood away from the fort. What happens in 1812? The War of 1812. So, War of 1812 is coming our way, and Fort Astoria, kind of a lone outpost out there, is in competition with the Northwest Company, a British company. They tell them, why don't you sell your fort to us, because we're going to come and take it by force if you don't. They sell it at a loss of maybe 1/3 of what it's worth, and then the British own it and they put a British flag up. But while this is happening, England has sent Captain Black in the HMS Raccoon from England to capture Fort Astoria. Do we have a Panama Canal back then?
No.
He's got to leave merry old England, or Portsmouth or London, wherever, comes down around the south of South America, Cape, comes up and comes into Columbia River, looks over Fort Astoria, and what does he see? A British flag over the fort he's supposed to capture. Well, he's not happy because he was hoping for some glory, maybe some prize. He goes ashore, asks what's going on. They tell him he sold it. No, no, no. Raise that British American flag back up. Takes his sword out in the name of king and country. I capture this fort. Breaks the bottom of deer at the bottom. Raises the British flag. And Fort Astoria becomes Fort George. Well, in 1813, a couple of British officers come and notice that they said willow trees are growing out of the fort. Then the Treaty of Ghent ends the War of 1812. And what the Treaty of Ghent says, among other things, is that any property captured by one country must be returned to the other. So had the Brits not captured Fort Astoria, they would have kept it. However, because it was captured, they had to give it back. They never did. They kept it anyhow. And it eventually merged, Northwest Company merged with the Hudson Bay Company. But that gives us oral history of what starts happening at the fort. It starts falling apart. 1850, a man named Carlos Shane gets 320 acres as a homestead, and the fort comes with it. He clear cuts everything, burns what's left of the fort, and plants potatoes. This is Carlos Shane and his potato farm. So, in the late 1800s, around 1890s or so, the Oregon Historical Society wants to know where Fort Clatsop was. They want to acquire the land. They ask a man named Silas Smith, who is Cobaway, the leader of the Clatsop's grandson. He comes back in 1899, and he points to where the fort is. That's Silas Smith pointing where the fort is. You take a look at what it looked like back in 1899. This is Carlos Shane House, which, by the way, is in that clump of trees over there. That's where his house would have been. For some perspective, this is Fort Clatsop in 1899. He also tells him his mom, Cobaway's daughter, told him about a room where there's a big stump that they just built around rather than remove it. So the stump room comes from Clatsop oral history. It doesn't come from any journal entries. Actually, the journal entries are very sparse. They do tell us that the captains had flooring. They built furniture for the captains. Clark talks about looking out his window and seeing a volley fire on the first of the year, January 1st, New Year's. Other than that, they don't tell us whether they had flooring in the enlisted quarters. Anyone here ever been in the military? Anyone here ever been enlisted? Well, no enlisted man wants to be any more miserable than you have to be. So my bet is, if you've got Sergeant Gass who can split 10-foot planks easily, he's going to give you some kind of flooring. I can't prove that, but I'm willing to bet a paycheck that that's what happened. Some sort of flooring was given to the enlisted men. Can't prove it. We don't even know what the fort looks like. They never described it. They never sketched it. So they bring Carlos Shane back in 1900 then, ask him, what do you remember about the fort? He remembers where the corners were. He remembers that there was a series of huts. Without ever having seen Clark's diagram, he describes a very similar footprint to what Clark told him. So they mark everything. But by 1953, what's coming up in 1955? 1805 to 1955, sesquicentennial, 150 years is coming up. But where we're standing right now in 1953 is a dump. It's been abused. People have been dumping stuff here, riding horses through, partying. It's overgrown. It's a mess. Oh, by the way, this was Fort Clatsop after they found out where the location was. There was a flagpole and a plaque that got stolen off, and that's 1906. Oregonians, a local paper, they write a scathing editorial saying we have the 150th anniversary coming up. Nothing to show for it. We ought to be embarrassed. Anyone know what the JCs are? JCs just stood up in Astoria, and they're looking for a project. Well, we've got a floor plan. We don't know what the fort looks like. They want to build a fort for the 150th anniversary. Very ambitious, great idea, but what do? We hire a man named Rolf Klepp. He's a New York artist. Using forts of the day and his journal entries, he comes up with what he believes the fort may have looked like. It's available in a publication we have at the front desk called the Fort Clatsop Replica, and he draws this fort, sorry it's heavily used. That's his actual drawing of what Fort Clatsop may have looked like. So based on that, the locals get together. It's all a locally done project. The man who owns the airport lets them use a hangar. They start construction of the first fort replica. They actually built it 3 times. So they got the Finnish Brotherhood, very skilled craftsmen, local business leaders, I believe it was Warren or Pacific, Georgia Pacific, Crown Zellerbach. Somebody gives them the wood. They take it to the hangar. They start building the first fort replica. It's in your brochure. That's a 1955 fort. Beautiful structure, not terribly realistic. Some of these logs are 50 feet long. They use saws on the end. Kind of a Scandinavian looking thing. You see the influence of it. They actually built this fort 3 times. They build it once in the hangar. They mark it, send it off to be Walmanized, which is a way of treating the wood. And guess what happens when they Walmanize it? All the numbers get wiped out. So they bring it back to the hangar, rebuild it, put metal numbers on, bring it out here, rebuild for the 3rd time. This fort is here until October 3rd, 2005, right before the bicentennial. They'd often have kids in here making candles, school groups, that type of thing, in these fireplaces. And they had one going that day, and put the fires out. Everyone leaves the park. It's a foggy night. Somewhere during the time, an ember had gotten underneath the floorboard. So that night, the fort caught fire, and before people outside the fort knew, they were looking at smoke and not fog. The fort burned down right before the bicentennial. Oh. So they used that opportunity to do some archaeology. They'd been doing archaeology. 1948, a man named Kaywood did it. Not terribly well, I might add. The way they would do it, this lady here and I are standing on trench number 9. From the flagpole to the intersection of those paths where the Smith house was, that was a relative of Father Shane. Take a backhoe. You found something, then you start doing your archaeological work. This is what the archaeological work looked like. They used ground penetrating radar in 2006, and they found a blue bead, something else, and a musket ball. So they're able to trace the DNA of the musket ball to a foundry in the Midwest that made lead for the military of that time. However, there's no way of proving that particular musket ball was on the expedition because too many people have been through here. This area has been plowed over numerous times. So there is no archaeological evidence whatsoever that the fort was ever here. But I can show you what they did find. This is the archaeological work that was done. Essentially on the back here, the ground penetrating radar will tell you that. The stuff they found is pretty much from the mid-1800s. Plates, pots, doorknobs, a lot of stuff from the modern times. No evidence whatsoever the expedition was here. So 2006, we do our ground penetrating radar, found those 2 items. So now it's time to rebuild the fort. Something happened in 1963. Private White House's journal is found, and he describes a different fort the day they leave, March 23rd, 1806. His fort looks like this. So, enlisted, smokehouse, Charbonneau family room, captain's quarters, orderly room, a large picket out front with a gate to the north and the south. His words put into images come out like this. Let me start the other way around. So that's what the day they leave. Clark's drawing is before they start. That's the day they leave. I believe the fort probably looked like that. However, that's just his words interpreted. That's an actual floor plan. 2006, we're looking at a burned down fort. We want to get it built back quickly. We already have a foundation. We have a floor plan. Again, just like before, people are going to come together here. So what do? We have funding right now. We have a plan right now. We can get this fort built pretty quickly right now. Or we can spend years trying to figure out how to make that into the fort, which may or may not actually be the fort, because as I mentioned before, whenever someone says something exact about the expedition, be very wary. So we got our funding. We're going to go with the Clark plan. It's as right as anything else. This time, though, they put all the timber up at the fairgrounds. Anyone who wants to can come and scrape bark off with period tools. I was on leave from Iraq at the time, and 3 of those logs are mine. So everyone gets together in community, just like the first time. Oh, back up a little bit. So, 1955, that fort's built. The Oregon Historical Society now finds themselves owning a fort with no way of taking care of it. They work with the federal government. In 1958, we become a national memorial. 2004, we become a national historical park. So, back to 2006. They get all the wood shaved off. They're using axes now in the end. All these logs are relatively portable by 1 or 2 people, no 50-foot logs. We use a colonial style of joining as opposed to the European style, which is called the Kentucky-Virginia style, I believe. More of a V than a round. The fort's rebuilt in 2006, November 10th. Or no, just November 2006. And been here since then. So, unless it burns down again, we're probably going to stick with the Clark model. But if it does, we may pursue the White House model.
I promise to.
I promise to.
Preserve and protect our parks.
Preserve and protect our parks.
Care for my natural.
Care for my